Welcome to Healing and Growing with me, your host, Peter Gold, PhD. Join me and renowned teachers, healers, and practitioners as we explore the realms of healing and growth. If you're seeking a better way in life or just curious about new ways to expand and enrich your life, you have come to the right place. Welcome to Healing and Growing with Peter Gold, PhD. Lorie Dechar is here. She is an acupuncturist, psychotherapist, teacher, author, and mentor, focusing on the intersection of traditional Chinese medicine, depth psychology, spirituality, and Taoist and European alchemy. And we'll get into what all this is. In 2006, she wrote 5 Spirits, Alchemical Acupuncture for Psychological and Spiritual Healing. In 2020, she wrote Kigo, exploring the spiritual essence of acupuncture points through the changing seasons. And in 2021, along with her husband, Benjamin Fox, she wrote The Alchemy of Inner Work, a guide for turning illness and suffering into true health and well-being. With over 35 years of Chinese medicine practice experience and over 15 years as a senior teacher of Chinese medicine, Lorie is widely respected by her peers as a wise woman and true elder. I am pleased to have Lorie Dechar here on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah,
wow. That was what a great send-off.
Here you
elder.
are.
And really stepped into that in the past few years and am loving, actually, this part of my life. And I have lately been adding to the roster of accomplishments being a grandmother.
Oh, congratulations.
So, that is
Grandma.
it's a great, thank you. Alchemical grandmother. I'm actually teaching my 5-year-old granddaughter. She's apprenticing.
Oh, beautiful.
It's like, okay, let's do points, okay? So she's like, lots of weariness. 100 meetings. What's that one on the bottom of the pizza? I feel like I've got my lineage is already assured.
Great. You're already starting to plant the seeds of the next.
I feel like it's the old-fashioned way.
That's so good. You know, I had my acupuncturist started taking needles out of people at like 4 years old.
Exactly.
In China. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that is the old way, and it's the family tradition.
My matzo. She's very good at rolling matzo with her little tiny fingers.
So, every time I see, well, first I should say that just to give the listeners some background and context on us, because we know each other, you married one of my dear old friends, Benjamin Fox, your co-author, and I knew Benjamin in Taos, New Mexico, many, 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 many moons ago, when I was there first teaching skiing. And then your book, The 5 Spirits, was a cornerstone in my dissertation. So, and just making my way through The Alchemy of Inner Work, your latest book, what a beautiful, I love this book so much. It's like a survey of all of, it's like, if you want to do inner work, it's not only it's the psychology, but it's also Bach flower remedies. It's also essential oils. I love the toolkit that you give people in here of how to help them through specific difficulties they're having towards the end of the book. So we'll get into this book. We'll get into 5 Spirits. I'm just delighted to have you here and to see you again.
Well, I'm delighted to be here and see you again. It's one of those treats of life when you know people over time and get to really witness each other's growth.
Yeah.
And I feel like we are speaking at this, what feels like a very pivotal or almost like next level of healing happening in the collective. That's how I feel. I mean, 1 week after the election and being with our community here, being with my patients, and now being together to really look at what does it look like now to work on the soul and to even say, what is mental health?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you go through these kind of pivotal, poignant times in your personal life, but also as a member of this world and this society, country, and culture, what I mean, you've been practicing for so long that I'm guessing that you have practices to help you that are just have been part you have such a reservoir of healing and what do I want to say? A reservoir of strength and stability and resilience. So I guess let's start with like how has this time been for you and what have you been doing to help yourself move through this time?
What I want to begin by saying, I mean, when you introduced me, and that bio's a little outdated, so it was over 35 years. It's actually over 40 now.
Okay.
And even,
You
no,
only
it's
look
okay.
29, so
Yeah, and only saying that to say, and then before that, in my early 20s, I was very engaged in women's spirituality and radical peace work. So it's been a very, very long time that I've been engaged in this question of how do we shift human beings' relationship to reality, to the planet, to their body, to each other. And when I turned to Chinese medicine, and began and knew it was my path, I was very clear that I wasn't going into it to simply alleviate physical suffering, even though it's an amazing modality for that, for relieving back pain or stomach disorders or injuries. But for me, it was this idea that working with qi, working with the life force, could be a way to actually transform my patient's relationship to their own body and to the world around them, to begin to see that we're not just these material physical beings, that we live in a subtle body that is interconnected with our ecology and with each other and with the animal and plant world, the more than human or other than human intelligences. So right from the beginning, that was my commitment. And also this sense, even at the beginning, that we were kind of on the cusp of a very, very radical shift in how human beings were being asked to live on the planet. And I feel like that has kind of been the through line. So even when I began to incorporate uh, Western psychotherapeutic practices and concepts into my work, and that was when I wrote Five Spirits, it was this idea that the modern soul was really suffering. That it's not just our bodies, but it is something about our non-physical, you could say, psyche or soul body that has really been calling out through symptomatology and suffering. And that these are all the tools that I've been focused on in my own work. So this week, when I think no matter what your political affiliation and orientation is, this has been a radically disorienting shift in how Americans are looking at each other, how we're looking at the institutions that we've sort of taken for granted, and even how we look to discover truth. Like, where do we stand when the foundation of our society and of our culture is kind of going through an earth, no matter where you're coming from. This is a big shift. And I think your question, what tools have I been calling on? I have been strongly calling on the tools because whatever resilience any of us has accumulated, that resilience this week, I think, has been tested. I would say, just to get very granular, for me, it's been coming back to my own body knowing.
Your own body knowing.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Not letting myself get too tangled up in trying to look into the future or figure out what's right or wrong or what's going to happen. But for me, the anchor point is in what I call a kind of inner sensing. The Taoists call it a nadon, inner alchemy, reversing my awareness and going into my own body and saying, how am I doing in this? And anchoring into what I call my animal body, the autonomic sort of muttering of my muscles and my chi. And last night in our community, we did a gathering where I talked about the body felt sense, which is something that I learned when I studied with Jean Genlin, developed focusing, and this body felt sense as a way back to the self, when a lot of the outer structures feel like they're disintegrating and cultural norms are shifting. Coming back to the body felt sense is a way to navigate waters that sometimes feel unnavigable.
I love that body sense, because it's like a turning inward, but it's not just a turning inward in your mind. It's a turning inward to what is going on inside your body felt sense.
Yeah.
And if not to get too far into focusing, but I think kind of one of the through lines of that work is, as you focus more on what is going on with you inside, things start to change, or things start to feel like they're more manageable.
Yeah, because really, that's the only manageability we have.
Yeah.
We really don't have control or ultimately manageability of the outer. And that's the beauty. Again, you mentioned alchemical healing, but the premise of this work is that inner work is what leads to skillful outer change.
I'm so excited to spend time with you and talk with you, because your work brings together so many, I think, powerful, important traditions. The 5-element acupuncture tradition, which is one of the lineages of Chinese medicine, but also the depth psychological tradition and the alchemical tradition. And I look forward to getting into what is alchemy, because people might not know what the hell is alchemy. But it's like when things come together in a certain way, and there are seasons. There are seasons within alchemy. There are seasons within Chinese medicine, and these old traditions are such great. I don't want to say tools, but like networks, like nets for us to fall back into, because they account for all of the feelings and all of the challenges and all of the harvests and all of the losses that we experience as human beings. So these traditions are so helpful and so useful, especially in times of turmoil.
Yeah. Well, in times of turmoil, I feel that these tools and traditions are indispensable.
Yeah.
We can't do this without, and that's why our ancestors, who've gone through their own turmoil and dissolutions and breakdowns, and these these wisdom traditions down to us.
Yeah. So just trying to continue on with what you were just saying about the tools, thinking back to a workshop that I was just in with Elijah, who I know is your colleague and we've talked about, but I just did a workshop with her and she's coming on the podcast. She's another 5-element acupuncture lineage holder, I would say, but also a Sufi, and she's very interesting, brilliant woman. I can't wait to have her on the podcast in a couple of weeks. But the workshop was on the metal and the water element in Chinese medicine. And in Chinese medicine, the metal is about what we exercises we did for the metal was bowing and bending so we didn't break, and bowing forward, allowing things to fall because they're gonna fall anyway, and then bowing up towards the sky to the fact that things are at play that are way bigger than us, and bowing to that. Bowing up towards the sky and then bowing forward all the way down, letting things go that are gonna fall away anyway, that you're gonna lose anyway. And it was Qigong exercises that we literally did, bowing up and back and then bowing down and letting everything fall down through the large intestine meridian that goes down the arms, down the index finger. It was a really powerful thing.
Beautiful.
And I've been doing a lot of that, thinking about that a lot since then, controlling what we can control and not trying to control what we can't. And that has given me a lot of relief, I think, and unburdened me. And there's a surrender in that. There's a
Beautiful,
surrender when the
Peter.
leaves
Exactly.
when the leaves fall off the trees, they surrender to the end of their life season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting, because I do think, in a way, we have our own teaching very much in our own, I would say, alchemy, and but there's a certain way that when you deeply engage in these traditions, there's an underlying archetypal wisdom and truth. And it's amazing that you said the bowing practice, because often when I teach metal, bowing is a practice, and I didn't even know that Thea was doing that. But it's the truth of metal. And I have come up with my own, what I call mudras and mantras for each of the elements that I teach in my mentorship training. And for metal, the metal mantra is I surrender to transformation. And the gesture is that sound.
And for people that don't know what we're talking about when we're talking about metal, metal is one of the 5 elements in Chinese medicine, and it corresponds to the late fall of the year when the leaves are falling, and when, Lorie, I want to hear from you.
No,
So
I love what
tell
you're
us
saying.
about
That's
the metal.
I mean, when people say, how do you know when it's metal season? And again, like you're saying, this is a beautiful piece of Chinese medicine, the what I call the great Ferris wheel of the season, this turning. And we're now turning down to the yin and entropy and surrender. And when people say, well, how do you know when metal season begins? I'm always like, well, when you're standing out on the road or the garden and you look up and then suddenly there's this first leaf.
Yeah, that's when it starts.
That's when it starts. And that's when it starts in us.
Mm-hmm.
And coming back around to the question of how do we deal with moments like we're in, huge transformational moment in a culture or in a family, a death, a divorce, a loss. Metal is the guide there. And the great medicine of metal is this really accepting, as you said, really accepting that I can't control how the world is, that I'm in the end going to surrender to a process that is much bigger than my own ego or my own will or my own desire.
So where, for you, where would you say, yes, I love asking these questions to
so
someone
much
that
to
has
this.
such a deep understanding and a depth in these traditions. Where would you say the line is between accepting and surrendering and being willful and being resilient and not giving up?
Peter, that I would say is really the essential question of all wisdom traditions, but certainly of the Taoist tradition. And for any of our listeners who are familiar, say, with a book like the I Ching, which many people do know, the essential question of the I Ching, which is translated the Book of Changes, is when do I go to the yin? When do I surrender? When do I let go? When do I pause and do nothing? And when do I go to that yang uprising of activity, creativity, movement, directionality? That oscillation and the balancing of those two great forces is essentially the work of Chinese medicine. And how we know, I mean, I would say for me, these are the tools that, say, Benjamin, and who you mentioned, my husband, Benjamin Fox, and I really bring to bear in the work that we do, in the teaching that we do in our community, in New Possibility, and all the students that we work with, the tools of astrology, the tools of, as you say, focusing, inner sensing, body felt sense, the tools of pulse taking, Chinese medicine, learning to listen to our dreams. That's how we know.
So, okay, let's talk a little bit about dreams and about the unconscious. I mean,
That's how we know, because the mind is just going to lead you if you try to think this one through, you'll just trick yourself constantly. That's why,
So there is the tradition of depth psychology, which acknowledges that there's something going on in the mind deeper than what we're aware of, and that intelligence can have and does have, if we listen to it well enough, a guiding kind of capacity for us and our lives.
And as I do, and again, our listeners who are listening on this conversation probably have many, many different levels of knowing about these topics. Some people probably are just listening for kind of gaining information the first time, and other people are well versed in Chinese medicine and depth psychology. But C.G. Jung, who is the founder of depth psychology and archetypal psychology, which is a lineage that both you and I are very engaged with, was deeply influenced by Taoism. In fact, his understanding of Taoist alchemy was pivotal in some of the theories that he developed about the unconscious. And both archetypal psychology and the dream work that emerges from that, and the work of Chinese medicine on a spirit level, firmly hold that there is a kind of a guiding, I like the word intelligence, that life is going somewhere, that the chi, or the life force, has an intelligence, it's going somewhere.
A telos, right?
Yes, a telos and telechy. Within each of us, there's where we have a path that's already there. You could call it karmic, you could call it Tao, you could call it your soul's purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And
Go
so
ahead.
that question that you asked, like, when do I pause? When do I move? When do I move into action? It's guided by that entelechy or telos. The movement of my soul has a knowing about that.
In the workshop, Thea said, just in passing, you can be you or you can be ill.
So, Thea, I'm sorry.
That just hit me. So she
So
just hit
great.
me.
Yeah.
She just
Yeah.
said it just, kind of in
Yeah.
passing. I was just
No,
like,
no, it's brilliant.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Because there is someone that we all are supposed to be, you could say, I guess. I mean, what do you think of that? Is that your understanding?
It's so when we start talking about this level, it even I think the supposed to doesn't even get added because it's so multidimensional. It it's I feel like it's more like, is an acorn supposed to be an oak? Yes, but it's also that its oakness is already in it. It can't, as Thea said, it can't be anything but that.
Mm-hmm. It's either
Because,
going to be an oak tree or it's not going
or
to.
it's going to just wither.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do believe, and I think all the wisdom traditions and all the alchemical traditions give us this truth that within us there is a kind of a star or a speck of, you could call it divinity, that wants to blossom.
Mm-hmm.
And even though sometimes when you look at the world right now and you look at people and you say, wow, it doesn't really look like they're blossoming their divinity. From my perspective, healing means I see that and I hold that and I believe that. And when a person comes to me, my job is to support them in finding that.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's, wading through dietary changes, exercise, then getting into meditation or practice or any of the dream work, the Qigong, it's all ultimately about supporting a person in finding that life stream within them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think even for me, culturally, on the level of human consciousness, it's the same. It's that something is trying to emerge here, as messy and chaotic as it seems, that we are being called to cultivate.
It's a very different way of practicing medicine than the Western way, which kind of focuses more on pathology. This way of practicing seems like it focuses on the health and trying to
Yes.
supplement, augment, support the health. And with
Yeah.
increased health is less pathology.
Yeah. That's a beautiful way to put it. That distinction between the focus on health and the intrinsic wholeness of a person, as opposed to the pathology. Even if someone is dying, that doesn't mean that they're not still moving into their wholeness. We can look at it that way. And the other distinction I would make is, I think for the most part, Western medicine and allopathic medicine is looking to get someone back to their old self again. Let's fix this problem so you can get back to work, back to exercising the way you have, back to whatever it was that you were doing. But what I say is getting back to what you were doing that got you sick in the first place. So an alchemical perspective is looking rather to say, how do I transform this problem or this lead that seems like a problem? How do I work with this in order to discover where I'm going, where my soul wants to grow to? So whether that's dealing with limitation or aging or loss or the world not going the way we want it to go, I think we're always looking here to see what is coming to life, what it wants to come to life, even in the midst of dissolution.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that reminds me of, Jung's idea of the symptom being like the clue to what
Yeah,
wants. Yeah. Say more about that for
well,
us.
that's the essence of alchemy. Like when you said, well, let's talk about alchemical healing. That's the essence of an alchemical healing approach. And again, Jung was steeped in alchemy. He lived and breathed alchemy. And just to backtrack just for a moment, as you said, what is alchemy? Because I do think it's worth just fleshing that out a bit, because I feel like alchemy is sort of having a moment on the social media sort of arena, and commercially people say, well, alchemy is a craft beer or a cosmetic brand or a dance party. But actually, when I speak of alchemy, I'm speaking about a very ancient wisdom tradition that was the way human beings organized their exploration of the world, kind of worldwide. It was present in ancient Egypt, in ancient China, in India. It's part of the Kabbalistic tradition. And I think, just to define it, alchemy is really the art and science of transformational process.
That's beautiful. Transformational process.
Specifically defining transformation as not a regressive movement back to where I was, but a progressive movement to states of higher skill, complexity, elegance, through growth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what we mean by lead to gold.
Mm-hmm. It's not getting rich by making lead into gold.
No, not rich in the financial sense, but rich in the soul sense. But soul being that golden light of the sun, the golden light of the spirit. Yeah, no, it's in fact, I think that when alchemy began to be corrupted by more modern ways of thinking, many alchemists got in trouble around that very thing, because rulers or kings or emperors would say, well, come, make my gold here. And of course, that really isn't the essence of the tradition. It's working with the internal illumination.
So, I'm thinking of Edward Ettinger's book about alchemy. And for those that don't know, Ettinger was a student of Jung, and kind of the anatomy of alchemy, I think, is the book, right?
I'm actually not familiar with that one.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Lord. Oh no, it is a, where is it? I don't. Oh, right here.
Yes.
The anatomy of the psyche.
The psyche, yeah.
Yeah, alchemical symbolism and psychotherapy.
Yeah.
So and because I know in your book, The Alchemy of Inner Work, which I just love this book so much. And I highly recommend everyone get it because it's a beautiful book. You talk about the kind of different, and this is what Ettinger talks about in The Anatomy of the Psyche, is the different phases of alchemy. And I'm wondering how you see what the relationship is. I mean, I could draw lines, but who cares what I think? You're the expert. What is the relationship between No,
I
you're
think
the master.
there's an expert constellating between us
Yeah,
that
okay.
we're
Sure.
discovering together.
I'll participate. I'm happy to participate in that.
Let's collaborate and discover
See what
God.
emerges.
God
Yeah.
knows we need experts.
Yeah. So, what's the relationship between like the cycles of alchemy in the alchemical traditions of Negredo and Albedo and all of these Latin terms that signify different stages of transformation, and the alchemy and the seasons of transformation on the, did you say call it the Ferris wheel?
Yeah, the cycle, the life cycle of the five, but I like to call it the Ferris wheel.
The Ferris wheel, yeah.
The elements, yeah.
The elements in Chinese medicine, which correspond to the seasons and those transformations that happen every year. Like, how do you, what is, not that they need to be reconciled, but what is the relationship between those things, if any, in your mind? If you are enjoying Healing and Growing, please take a second right now. Yes, please, right now, to like, follow, and share this show on whatever platform you're listening on so that more people can further their journey of healing and growing. Thank you very much for doing this. I greatly appreciate all your support.
Well, given that this is a podcast and we don't have like 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 10 years or a century or two to talk about this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna like really
do
come down and in
Do it.
to what I feel is the central teaching here.
Great.
That is really relevant to our life now, anybody's life. And that's what I have come to see as basically the dance of what I spoke to earlier, the movement of the I Ching, the movement of yin and yang, this movement of expansion and contraction. Because we could look at all the phases of alchemy or the 5 elements and not to say that's not a beautiful and important investigation, but the most important piece is this. Alchemy is about the marriage of opposites, essentially. Bringing together the yin and the yang of the cosmos, spirit and matter, mind and body, darkness and light, to create something new. That's actually why Benjamin and I call our community a new possibility.
It's beautiful.
Coming back again to the idea that alchemy is not about going back to what was, but giving birth to something new, the divine child, the new possibility.
Mm-hmm. What Jung called the, go ahead, please.
Yeah.
It just reminded me of Jung's concept of the transcendent, what he called the transcendent function.
Yeah. So what we're looking at is an oscillation, essentially, between death and life, contraction and expansion, or what I like to talk about as the order-disorder of creation, transformation. And the 2 primary phases in alchemy that describe that are, you mentioned, the Connuntio and the Negredo. Mm-hmm. So in our lives, what I really emphasize in my teaching is to understand that with every expansion, every new insight, every connection that we make, there's going to be a contraction. There's going to be a time where we need to rest and integrate, and that may even feel like a depression. So even here with us, there's this, we're having a kind of conjunctio. We haven't seen each other in a while. We haven't connected, and there's a kind of a flash of excitement and expansion. But then it's like, even now as we're talking, we kind of need to bring that in and down into like what really, if we really sit within this moment, what really matters. What's really matters in the work that we both love and have committed our lives to.
So that brings me back to, or makes me think back to this question that what you said earlier in the conversation about, what do you think that humans are being asked to live in a different way at this time on Earth? And I'm curious what you think that different way is.
For me, and again, I'm not, I'm hardly a spokesperson for the vast collective, but in the work that I do and in the communities that I'm engaged in, what I feel is we're being asked to reconnect to, in a sense, the Negretto, to the yin, to all
Let's
these
talk about,
practices.
can you just expand just a little bit on what the Negretto is for those that don't know?
Yes. So the Negretto, so coming back to those two phases of alchemy, the conjunctio, the excitement, the enlivening expansion that we may experience, say, in a marriage would be a conjunctio. When you go to a wedding, that's a conjunctio. I mean, we've all, just to get very practical, like we've all gone to wedding, right? And that's emblematic. That is the divine archetype of the conjunctio. So two come together, and there's this, everybody's celebrating and dancing, and there's music. And then the day after that, inevitably, you'll see. I mean, I know myself, when I got married, the next day, actually, Benjamin and I were doing dishes. We were sitting there cleaning up, right? It's like you're coming in, you've got to come back to the contraction, the bringing it down into integration. So the Negretto, the translation would be the darkening, the going into matter. And for all of us, I think that those oscillations are there, but our culture has a tremendous fear and rejection of the Negretto aspect of life. And it's to our peril, because if we don't allow ourselves to surrender, metal is all about the Negretto. I'm surrendering, I'm bowing, I'm being limited.
Coming back down and in.
Into the body, into my own knowing. There's a burnout. There's what we're seeing, fires all over the planet, drought, and this kind of heating up of the climate. Like, I see all of that as a larger expression of a serious problem in human consciousness right now.
Which is not wanting to go into the Negretto.
A rejection of this darkening of the yin, an exiling of the aspects of the divine that are related to, we could say, those going down, the practices that are about slowing down, pausing, not necessarily constantly getting bigger and growing and richer and accumulating and more and more and more, but really being with our own limitations. And there's a certain kind of relief there. And that's where we also get deeply resourced in those rest places. So the change, as what you asked me, what do I see as the shift?
How are we being asked to live differently?
Yeah, that ask, I think, of the planet, of all of us, is to really shift our relationship to our own bodies and to the outer world, that we begin to listen more deeply to ourselves and to the planet, and the planet is speaking to us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that the danger here is that this sounds very theoretical or maybe conceptual, but it's not conceptual. It's really a day-to-day, moment-to-moment way of being present. I think the practices that you spoke to, traditionally, a bowing practice was very much a part of people's lives in whatever spiritual tradition you were part of.
Mm.
And even just that, in the morning, taking some time to be quiet and maybe to be in gratitude just for 5 or 10 minutes before you start the activity of the day, that's a profound practice.
Mm. How so? What's profound about that?
Well, I'm going to backtrack a tiny bit. One of the core practices that I teach in my training programs is what I call the pause practice.
Okay.
And I give it an acronym, RSVP. And the acronym means like recognize when you're speeding up and being in reactivity and being in a sort of unskillful expenditure of your life force. Recognize when you're nervously reacting, and S means stop. V is reversing. So I kind of cheated a bit on that one, but it's reversing your awareness. As we say, coming in and saying, oh, what's going on inside of me here in this moment? What do I need? And the P is just getting present to that, what I need right now. So say for me in our conversation, as I do that, I'm aware that it's very easy for me as a fiery person to get very conceptual and speeded up and try and share so many ideas. But as I do that pause practice, I become aware of the need to just take a breath here together.
Mm-hmm.
And remember that we are speaking about really deep and sacred practice
Well,
together.
and also, I would say very, very relevant practices.
Yes. And
because sometimes I think deep and sacred can also kind of fly away when it's like, no, these practices are designed to help us, as you're saying, be more present in life, be more resilient, more aware in this life right here and now. And I think
here, that was a perfect example of us being collaborative in our
yeah.
that's beautiful what you said.
Mm-hmm.
It is coming back to the very first thing you asked me, what have I been doing this week? to stay in my resilience. The pause has been one of the greatest kind of go-to tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's the opposite of what social media wants us to do, what the news cycles want us to do. And the pause, from a Taoist perspective, is doing by not doing, and making space for that greater wisdom into the conversation or the moment.
Yeah, I feel like it's very healing to take the pause, and maybe the pause can be 5 minutes, maybe it can be a whole day. I know sometimes it is for me in my life, but what I feel like what happens is there's a healing that happens in that in my experience, like an off gassing of like almost like electromagnetic energy that has the time to release when I slow down enough, and I can really feel like the inner alchemy of my continents changing. And it's healing because it's about, it's about letting go. It's not about acquiring more. And the letting go is what is liberating in a way.
Also, the letting go in that space that gets created through that, from the perspective of the ancient Taoist wisdom tradition, in that space, that's where we can call it spirit, Shen, illumination, that greater, whether it's coming from above or below. If we don't make that space, we're not going to be able to hear it.
Mm-hmm. Above or below or inside.
Or I guess, right.
Sometimes it's like I feel like there's so much kind of caked on to me and what I've been thinking and what I've been feeling that it when I slow down and I take the pauses, that inner kind of life force returns and kind of sloughs off or breaks me free of this shell that I've accumulated through living a human life.
So right there, when we say, okay, so what are some of the ways that we're being invited, asked, or maybe even forced to change in order to survive this moment, and also the uncertainty, the dissolution, the transformation that I feel human beings are in the midst of. This practice of pausing, making space. So when you say, why does this 5 minutes or 10 minutes in the morning make such a difference? It's beginning our day with the pause. It's in a way, it's beginning the day with a bowing to something greater than me, a surrendering of the ego self that just wants to get going. I have 100 things to do. I got to make these calls. I got to make my lunch. I got to figure out, how I'm going to get everything done. I'm going to say, okay, yes. And before that, this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if you know or not, but I mean, I start and end my every single day with pausing, with sitting at my altar. I get up, I have a glass of water, and then I sit at I light my candle, I sit at my altar, and I give myself time to transition from sleep time, dream time, slower consciousness to the speed of the day. And then at the end of the day, before I go to sleep, I do the same thing. Sit in my altar, bow. I always bow in and bow out of the altar space. And then at the end of the day, bow in and light the candle, light my incense, and just sit and let kind of the momentum of the day kind of wash over and past me so that I can return to stillness. I can return to the animating force that makes me be alive, that pumps my heart.
And I've known you a very long time, not with frequency, but over time. And I've seen how you have set yourself path, moving from teaching seeing and doing body work, and then, really committing, learning Qigong and being really interested in Chinese medicine, and then going in the direction of the psyche, and still in a process of integration and growth. And that's not easy. That takes real intention. It takes devotion. It's developing your own, what I call alchemy. And I think that the fact that you have this practice, when you say this to me, I'm like, yeah, that is a piece of being able to stay with our entelechy, like where we started. How do we do this? We do this by bowing and surrendering, and alchemy takes time, and it takes practice, and it takes commitment, like what you said, that every morning and every evening. And those what seemingly simple things like lighting the candle and bowing and sitting quietly are transformative. They are transformative. Yeah. Yeah.
You said something. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that my colleague and good friend Lorie Dechar, who's another 5-element acupuncturist, I think you know,
Nourishing Destiny,
in his most recent book, which is another big tome of a book, he really speaks about this form of teaching our patients, or supporting our patients in doing just what you said, sitting quietly for 5 or 10 minutes every day. It changes everything.
Yeah, I don't, my first Qigong teacher said, I remember him saying he can't imagine living a life in which there's no regular reflective practice.
Yeah.
And I feel like so much of our society kind of encourages, foments a kind of reeling where there's no pause, there's no stop, there's only just careening forward. And not if we should do something, but can we do something? And we're going to do something. If we can do it, we're going to do it. There's no consideration of, well, is this a good idea? Do we think this? Let's just stop here and look. At least look before we leave.
Yeah. And, I sort of started out this whole conversation by saying that I've added to my curriculum vitae, my CV now includes being a grandmother. And I kind of joke about it, but there's some real truth to being at the stage of life that I'm at, and seeing this, not just the next generation, but the next generation, and really understanding how there's something about that slows you down, that says, okay, there's so much going on out there, but at the same time, something about eldering that does bring you, whether you can resist it, but if you don't resist it, the wisdom of it is exactly what you're saying, that you realize that you're not going to be able to control it all, and that each moment is so precious that you better slow down and pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's like the fundamental Buddhist teaching. The whole point of everything is to be present. Of meditation, of Qigong, of all these practices is to be present to, like, and I'm just going to integrate what we've talked about. It is to be present to when it's time to act and when it's time to not act.
And I think as we're beginning to bring things together, I'm curious because I know you and I have both been very committed to bringing the wisdom of Chinese medicine and Taoism and depth psychology together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious because I know you've done deep study. I read your dissertation and really admire the really rigorous work that you did to
Thank you.
develop your own ideas.
Thank you.
Now, what is it that we feel is so crucial about that combination of kind of ways of looking at the soul, particularly at this time? Because I know we both feel that. And other people, of course, there are others engaged in that. What is it that the Taoist alchemical tradition and the Chinese medical tradition on the spirit level, what do they know about the soul that is so important right now? And that Jung saw even in his being inspired by it. And really asking that because I mean, I know I think about it a lot myself, but coming together with you here and knowing that you've devoted a significant amount of your own life to that question. This week, what is it teaching us? I mean, yes, the pause. Yes, making space for the yin. Very much about this idea that there's an intelligence that we need to listen for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's why people work with their dreams, isn't it? Is to listen to the intelligence that's trying to come through, trying to inform us about when to act and when not to act and how not to act. And it's interesting because I talked to Thea about this a little bit. I asked her privately because, I remember people talking about my professors talking about Jung and saying like he did all this individuation work and, he didn't die like he wasn't enlightened. He didn't
No.
die like,
No.
he figured it all out.
No.
And so I
No.
asked Thea, it's like, what, like, do you feel like these practices make a difference in your life? And I don't think that it's about I've always felt like it's really easy to get to nirvana if you're on a mountaintop and you meditate for a sufficiently long period of time. It's like, it's easy. It's easy. It's way easier, let's say, than doing the dance of eternity and this time-bound world. But I think that's what all these practices, the alchemy of inner work, all of these practices are about, how to live in a way that is informed by something beyond us,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but is
That feels like it's
actually,
getting at it.
but
Yeah.
it's actually informing us in this life, to be more of our own version of an oak tree,
Mhm.
our own unique
Yeah.
trait.
Yeah. And the in the alchemical traditions, and one of the reasons I think that alchemical traditions were never became mainstream and were always suspect in whatever countries. They were never the mainstream. They're not the sort of religion that gets adopted by the governing body, because alchemists, a central premise of all the traditions is that you find the truth from within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this week and this year, these years in particular, when we find ourselves in the dissolution of postmodernism, where truth becomes so relative, and where do we turn to know if someone is worth listening to when there's thousands and thousands of data points coming at us at every moment?
Mm-hmm.
How do we stay human here? And how do we know, as you say, when to respond, when to take an action, when to stay in stillness? These tools that support us in finding the truth from within ourselves, what I'm calling the internal gyroscope,
Mm.
that feels like the thing. And even as we're talking, I'm kind of aware that, between us, I have this sense of a kind of, like, I think of the secret of the golden flower, like something is trying to emerge even in this conversation, because all the conversations that we're having right now around this topic really matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. And I've been thinking a lot about, like, what is it? What, I guess, the loss of humanity, loss of our common humanity, with uh, us becoming increasingly cyborgs. Increasingly we are moving away from our humanity and more into the digital world, where, you know, for a lot of people, their digital identity is way more important than their actual identity. And their perception, or what they're putting out in the digital world, and the response to that, is more real than what than their physical human life.
Yeah.
And it's a very, I took this course in graduate school called, I can't remember what it was called, but it was basically about, like, the interplay between depth psychology and like the digital age, basically. And there was a book we read that was called Alone Together by this MIT professor. You
Oh,
know that
that
book?
book. Yeah.
Yeah. And just so, I don't know, I've been thinking a lot about that. Like, what is going on? What is this transformation? Because I think the next 50 years are going to be so different than the last 50 years. And there's never been a time, like, you think about the time between 1475 and 1525, or you think about the time between 1675 and 1725. Those are 50-year periods. They're more or less the same. There was no electricity invented. There was no airplane invented. There's no cars, and there's no internet invented. But between 1975 and 2025, there's been such a shift and a change in the way that humans experience this world.
Right. But I think what's getting missed, because definitely on the outside, yes, all of that. But what I'm seeing and what I'm interested in is what's happening on the inside of people's psyche. Because all that can happen, and we can get totally lost in those outer changes. That to me is a danger. Because inside of our neurobiology, there's also something that has an intelligence shift. And that, to me, is a shifting beyond binary and beyond dualism and beyond the limits of the way that we've been thinking about the world. I think that technology in a certain way is giving us a little taste. Like, I can be on a Zoom now with my students, and there are people in Australia, people in Canada, people in South America, people on the West Coast, the East Coast, all at once in one time zone. And I would say, like, this is training wheel for our consciousness that is ready to shift out of the limitations of linear time and 3D space. So in the next 50 years, what I'm looking at is the possibility of a shift in consciousness and our relationship to time and space that I'm actually seeing in the community I work with. Like, yesterday I gave this talk. I do a talk called Alchemy at the Edge, AcuSpeak, and I do it every season. And if you're a member of the community, you do that for free and you get credit if you're not. But anyway, a lot of people come, all acupuncturists, but practitioners of all sorts. And I give a talk that's related to the season or the element or just what I'm thinking about. And yesterday I had gotten guidance from a spider called an orb weaver spider that came was outside our kitchen window. And I had an amazing dialogue and download of wisdom from the spider that I shared yesterday as part of my talk. And one of the participants, who's an acupuncturist and also in our mentorship program, after the talk, put up a photograph. She said, as you were talking, here's what was happening. And outside her window, there was an orb weaver spider weaving a web. So and in our community, and I think when we do the level of work, even what you and I are doing here now, like, there are webs of psyche or awareness that get woven here that transcend. You're on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast, and yet we're in presence. And synchronicities and kind of collapsing of space and time, collapsing even of past and future, that I'm totally tuned into, and that I am convinced when we say what are human beings asked to attend to right now. I think those of us who are dealing with psyche and not technology or finance or whatever else is going on out there, that this is an active engagement that we need to speak to. And I have no doubt, like, you have a very busy private practice. And I have no doubt that when you're working deeply with people's psyches, that even dreams, you see where our assumption about reality are relative, that there are other dimensions of knowing and being that we need to access and listen to as we move through the challenges. And as you say, even the cyborging of our human.
I just
We're
wonder. Go
bigger
ahead.
than we think we are.
Mm. But I think an ingredient that's being added into our psyches is the web, the World Wide Web, the internet, and everything that's in that. I
Yeah,
mean,
for better and for worse.
yeah, absolutely. It's so ubiquitous that
Yeah.
and then, I was watching these videos of Neuralink, Elon Musk company that,
Yeah. Mhm.
and they're literally implanting chips into people's head. And so people that are paralyzed can just think something, and then it will move the cursor and click the thing on the screen. And
Mhm.
then augmenting that with like a robotic arm,
Mhm.
it really is so like futuristic, but it's here. And it's such a transformative time, I think, where there's a turning from being human to being something that's not only human.
Yes, I know that that's on the horizon, and of course, those are the moments when I say I'm glad that I won't be here, probably to see the full flourishing of that. But what I will say about that is that although that's probably inevitable, and even the probability that men will be able to find a way to force life to interface with technology and even escape the limitation of having to come through a woman's body, because I'm sure that is something that is of interest to some researchers. Nonetheless, we will all die and decompose. We will all go back to the great ground of being. There will still be rhizomes under the earth that actually we are dependent on for life. So I think, to me, even though I really get that what you're saying, I know what you're saying is true. I'm not in denial about it. My interest is in cultivating the life of the soul and the dimensions of the soul, even as there's a movement to divorce, I wouldn't say life, but intelligence from its ground.
Mm. Yeah, I've just been curious about the impact of technology in the life of the soul.
Yeah.
Like, what influence will that have? Because it's never happened before.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really important question.
So anyway, it's just really interesting to think about, and we shall see.
Yes,
You
we
know,
shall see. And I think that you are, much younger than I am, and probably will be very much a part of that investigation, being in the world that you're in and being so engaged in supporting people and finding a way to stay in their humanity and to stay in their mental health through these changes.
hmm yeah, yeah. It'll be interesting to see, like, what is mental health when we can access the web within our own minds. That it's no longer an external rectangle, but it's no longer glasses. It's inside of our bodies. It's a it's really kind of I, it's just never happened before. So it's a really interesting thing.
It's never happened
It's never
before.
no, I had this friend that said, any soul that could get a body during this period of time got one, just to be alive, to see what's
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah. Well, that brings us back to where we started. 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm actually going to go see what my grandkids are up to right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
Jill,
so much,
yeah.
Lorie,
Thank you,
for this
Peter.
conversation.
Thank you. And I'm so glad that we're in this exploration together.
Yeah, we're in it. Yeah, me too. Very
Yeah.
much so. If
Yes.
people want to get in touch with you and learn more about what you're doing and what you're offering, where would you send them?
They can go direct to anewpossibility.com. As I said, we're all about creating that new possibility. That is the website that includes all my work, my teaching, entry into our community, the Inner Healing Circle, or people can just come in for free as explorers and look around. And we would love, once you get to the website, contact us, say hello. We love hearing from people. That's probably the best way. I'm also have a very active Instagram at Lorie Dechar and at anewpossibility.com. We've got lots going on in all those arenas, and love to meet people interested in this level of living, healing, and being.
Beautiful. Well, thanks again,
Peter.
Lorie, so much for being here for this conversation. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you again soon in person.
Yes, that sounds great.
Okay.
Take good care. Much love. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.